Ladies and gentlemen, if you would please take your seats. Please take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll now resume today's consultation. Just before the break, we had a number of presidents, financial secretary, from the president of the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, from the governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. We also had a wonderful presentation, rendition from Natasha Gordon, and also we heard from the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Now we'll resume with a presentation from the Attorney General and the Minister responsible for communications, Honorable Vincent Byron. As we invite Mr. Byron to make his presentation, I just want to remind you that after that presentation, we'll have one from Roger Hennis. The government of St. Kitts and Nevis digital strategy will be shared, and then we'll have some discussions right after that, and then we'll break for lunch, after which we'll have the panel discussion, perspectives on the St. Kitts and Nevis digital economy. Please help me in welcoming the Attorney General, Honorable Vincent Byron.
Thank you very much, Mr. Master of Ceremonies, Mr. Val Henry. Permit me to adopt the protocol that has been established this morning, save to recognize the Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Timothy Harris, and my cabinet colleagues, Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Sean Richards, Senior Minister, the Honorable Vance Amory, Honorable Lindsey Grant, Honorable Eugene Hamilton. I see the Honorable Ian Patches Liebert, and somewhere around is the Honorable Wendy Phipps, not to forget our Cabinet Secretary, Mrs. Josephine Huggins, and our Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Akila Byron Nisbet, and her husband, Alexis Nisbet. I also want to recognize at the head table the Financial Secretary, Mrs. Hilary Hazel, who has put together this wonderful exposition on our economy, this consultation economy, a digital economy, and I want you to give her a round of applause, please. I want to note as well the presence of the President of the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, Mr. Farron Lawrence, who has brought some staunch words for us this morning, which has already begun the consultation and the discussion, Farron Lawrence, and the other presenter at the head table, Mr. Roger Hennis. Initially, when I had been introduced to give some remarks, it was really to introduce Mr. Roger Hennis, but I see it has now spread to a broader remarks, so I take my cue from that. Just to say before I get into my presentation, that I'd also want to recognize our captains of industry, our business leaders, and in particular, those who represent our service providers. I note Ms. Patricia Walters from the cable. I note David Lake from Floor Cable and Wireless, as well as Mrs. Dion Emtich from Digicel, who are here with us, and all others who represent the foundation of our digital economy in the private sector. And I think it's important to recognize them. Our theme for this consultation on the economy has to do with digital transformation. The economic strategy of our government going forward is to be buttressed by the extent to which we can move our country to be a digital one. And so I want to begin by briefly speaking about three concepts. One, digitization. I want to speak about digitalization and then digital transformation before I give a brief synopsis of what our government has been doing over our recent past. The concept of digitization is one in which we keep records on paper, whether handwritten in ledgers or typed into documents, business data, which we call analog. If you wanted to gather or share information, you dealt with physical documents, papers and binders, Xeroxes and faxes. They were in a dusty cabinet somewhere. Computers then went mainstream, and everybody had to get a computer, and most businesses and government departments started converting all those ink on paper records to digital computer files. This process of taking your paper-based records and putting them on computer, whether you scan them or whatever you do, is called digitization. And it's a process where most of our institutions still lag behind. So I would want to posit that the first process in our digital transformation strategy has to be to convert paper-based records into digital records, move from analog to digital. So the process of digitization is a fundamental issue, and so we'll hear a little bit more of that later, I'm sure. After digitization, we have to, the process by which we use digitized information to make established ways of working simpler and more efficient is called digitalization. Note the word established in that definition. Digitalization isn't about changing how you do business or creating new types of business. It's about keeping on, so that you do so faster and better. Know that your data is instantly accessible and not trapped in a file cabinet somewhere in a dusty archive. So we now can access information, pulling it up on a computer, rather than to go down to the registry where our files would have been kept, say in government headquarters somewhere. Digital transformation is changing the way business gets done, and in some cases, creating entirely new classes of businesses. With digital transformation, Companies, businesses, government departments are taking a step back and revisiting everything they do, from internal systems to customer interactions, both online and in person. We are asking big questions like, can we change our processes in a way that will enable better decision-making, game-changing efficiencies, or a better customer experience with more personalization? So the concept of transformation in a digital world has to be, how do we do things differently and better? How do we improve doing the way how we do it than how it was done before? It's not just enough for us to convert our paper-based records and to do matters like that, but how we use that information, how we are able to transform that. And at the center of that process, I would want to say digital transformation begins and ends with the customer, the person who is going to be the recipient of that. It has to be citizen-centric when it comes to the government. When we are dealing with the public, digitalization is to make that experience. How do we provide services for people to make it easier for them to function? This year, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis has engaged Deloitte Touche in the person of Mr. Roger Hennis to be able to assist us with our digital transformation strategy. We have been, over the last few years, doing a number of these processes I spoke about, whether it was digitization, digitalization. We have done things in different departments, in ad hoc ways. But we have taken a decision at the cabinet level to focus on global strategy, how to improve the way we do business in government, how to transform us from being this bureaucratic structure, which still pervades most of what we do, to make us easier to respond to the work of our citizens, to our businesses, our stakeholders in a way. And so we have taken that decision into digital transformation. Roger Hennis speaks after me, and he will look at our current state. He'll make a report on the current state. He will look at our future state, where we have to go to. And he'll do so in a number of different ways. And so I encourage you and urge you to listen to that presentation that we will make. I want to say that we have heard a number of what I'm saying before, questions that our way how we do business, whether in government or the private sector, must now be data-driven. We have to have data at the access of our system. When we take decisions, we must understand how many people that we are affecting, what segments we are affecting, how we disaggregate information and make decisions that are targeted and more efficient. And this is for people in the private sector as it is in government. I like to give an example of a concept of transformation that I would like to see in government, and that has to do, the very simple one, in terms of how to get a passport. Because if you have to get a passport today, you go to the post office and you have to buy a $3 stamp that you have to go to the health center, walk all the way up to Connell Street to the $3 stamp to get a birth certificate. You then have to go to the post office, I suppose you could do it at the same time, and get a $10 stamp. And you go up to the police headquarters to get a police record. And after that, you have to go to the government headquarters and fill out an application form with $150 of stamps. And you're told to come back in 2 weeks to get your passport. And the vision I see in digital transformation is that you should be able to go online and apply on a form online, pay online, and be able to tell you can come down in 6 hours and get your passport. It's more efficient, it works better, it makes us so better. And there's so many different ways in government that we expect this to happen. We have out in the lobby a sample of some of the things that are happening right now in terms of our economy that makes life easier, more efficient, and better. Inland revenue, where you can pay up to, I think the last count was 8 taxes online from the comfort of your offices, your homes. If you want to renew your driver's license, you can do so online. The traffic systems that you'll hear about later today when our e-government coordinator, Ophelia Blanchard, sits on our panel, is one that is one for all of us to be proud of. We track every vehicle in St. Kitts and Nevis is tracked on a database. They're recorded and registered. When you're not in license, a police officer can simply access that to find whether your vehicle is licensed or not. All of this has been done locally by local software developers and programmers. So we are in the process of this digital transformation as we speak, whether it's agriculture, where we register farmers to be able to access support from the agricultural department and do various things. We like to see them being able to display their wares when they harvest a crop, to be able to put it on immediately and for you to be able to access that type of product immediately, although we don't want to cut out necessarily the vendors downtown. But there are a number of different areas where we in government have been able to do some of this digitalization, and we're hoping to have an integrated, connectivity in the way how we do digital transformation. I want to briefly speak about Roger, because Roger will develop some of these concepts I've been talking about in a much more efficient way than I can do. Roger Hennis came to work with us a couple years ago, primarily because we had been introduced to him through Kitishan, Larry Quinlan. Larry Quinlan is the global chief information officer for Deloitte Touche Tohmatsu, based in the United States. He oversees hundreds of thousands of employees worldwide. And he was invited to give the feature address at our Independence Lecture in 2016 in Nevis. And he spoke to the fact of moving St. Kitts forward into a new digital age. And in our discussions afterwards, he not being able himself to get involved for conflict of interest, he has interest in St. Kitts. He directed us to the Caribbean region, and ultimately, Roger, who's based in the Barbados office, comes to us well regarded. Before we, in the central government, federal government, engaged with Deloitte, he has done some work with the cable in terms of helping to develop their broadband strategy. But in March of this year, he and his team began working with public sector leaders across government. And they met with cabinet, and there were a number of engagements. And so he has produced this report and a roadmap going forward over the next 3 to 5 years, how we can see how government can be transformed into a digital, fully digital entity. We would want to be a leader to set the example for the private sector, who are doing their own thing. In many, many instances, we have private sector entities in our country that are quite advanced in doing that digital work. I can speak to one of the kiosks out there. We have CaribPay, for instance. Dean Herbert over in Nevis, they introduced a payment card that allows vendors, the smoothie operator on Princess Street, and various vendors to be able to access cashless payments through a digital card that you can top up from time to time. And ultimately, that is when you go online, that can be transferred. At the last count, in my last discussion with them, there are some 80 such vendors in Nevis who have signed up. And as more and more individuals get their CaribPay card, you can do shopping on the street or wherever it is to do so. The question of payment solutions, then, is a form of digital transformation. How can I pay my electricity bill? How can I pay various government services or work in business without having to use cash or check or anything like that? More and more of our businesses are becoming connected. And so we look forward to that. I want to talk, before I sit down, because I can feel the figurative hand of the FS pulling my coat already. I'm just supposed to have 10 minutes. But I want to talk about some of the other processes that we are involved in through the Ministry of Communications, which I oversee. Some 2-3 years ago, we were able to reestablish our National ICT Center at Ponds at St. Paul Southwell Industrial Park. This had begun with support from the Taiwanese back in 2008, but in 2012, this closed down. 13, 14, 15, it was out of commission. But again, we were able to approach the Taiwanese, and with their support, and with government input from Ministry of Finance, we were able to invest, the two of us, some $2 million to get it up and running. The National ICT Center allows for us to have a home for our Department of Technology, where we oversee broadband establishment for government offices in the Basti area and around the country. Some 80 to 90% of all government buildings are connected by fiber networks, and which are managed out of the Treasury as the central administrative zone. At the National ICT Center, we do training, not just for government officers, but also for the private sector. And we have 2 training rooms with some 40 computers that we are developing the capacity in our people to be ready, as it was, to adapt to and absorb this new transformation we are having. It's important to speak about that, because at the heart of our digital transformation strategy is not just about physical infrastructure, it's not just about changing the processes by which we do things, but also, and most importantly maybe, collaboratively at the same time, has to do with our people, our public servants, for those who work in your private sector establishments. We have to develop our workers, our people, to think and behave in a certain way with these new technologies, for them to be more innovative, for them to understand the responsibilities they have in this new digital economy as we go forward. And so the ICT Center, the National ICT Center, is a focal point which we invite the public to, and the private sector, to come and use to get certified in a number of different certifications, whether it's Microsoft or other development packages that you need in your businesses. You can now do that training here properly, whereas before we might have had to travel overseas for that certification. Certification can now be done in-house. I want to talk very quickly about a couple of the other things we are doing. E-litigation. Just a couple of weeks ago, we began in the Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs to be able to establish that every matter that now has to be filed in the High Court, in civil matters, and at the Court of Appeal must be done online. So it's part of our digital transformation that attorneys can now stay at their chambers and file matters in court online using a new e-litigation service that is there. We were spoken to earlier by the President about the question of ease of doing business index, and I wanted to say to him and to the business community and the wider community as a whole that this has been actually under consideration for the last couple of years. It is why we went and we passed legislation to establish land registry that we hopefully will be able to find a home over the next couple months, now that the Financial Secretary has afforded us a new property for the Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs, that we can establish that land registry there. More importantly, though, is that the work of filing titles and other land registry matters can now be done, will now be able to be done online over the next few months. We have been working with the Taiwanese, and we expect that this digitalization of filing titles will help to improve the process of being able to register titles, land titles. And while I hear the ringing sound in the background telling me it's time to end, I just want to make the further point in terms of land registration that we, over the next couple of weeks, will have on ground a company by the name of Medici Land Governance Company, who will be coming here to assist us in mapping every lot of land on St. Kitts. It would allow us to digitize land registration over the next 6 months. So by the middle of next year, we hope that between this process of digitizing land registry, of digitizing the registration to the Land Administration Information System, that this would allow us to improve another area that we know has been lagging. I would want to say, though, that since we have been able to establish a land registry as a unit, we have been able in St. Kitts to do over 3,500 land registration titles. So we are making significant improvement. We have a long way to go, but we are improving on that. I just want to say that you'll hear more of this afternoon when Ophelia Blanchard sits with CEO Pat Walters, David Lake, Alex Strawn, and others to talk more about what we are doing in government, especially the traffic administration system is one to look out for, and what happens with the police and national security. I'm happy to have been able to say those few words, and I'm sure that Roger, when he comes, will enhance some of what we are doing. But it's important, as I leave, to understand what next. What next is that the government will put their money behind their words, and we hope that in the new year we'll be able to establish a transformation management office that will actually be targeting, as it was, this process of transformation, that our services that serve the people of St. Kitts and Nevis would be more efficient, be more creative, will help us, as it was, to make us work towards, as the Prime Minister likes to say, the best managed small island state anywhere in the world. I can go on to speak about broadband strategy, but my time is up. But thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Attorney General. Without any delay, I now invite Roger Hennis to make his presentation.
All right, good. Adopting the protocol that has been established. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll start by saying I actually was originally born in the OECS. I was actually born in Antigua. Not that that should give me any privileges, but I was born in Antigua, and I actually lived there till I was 5 years old, and then I moved back to Barbados, and I've lived in Barbados all my life. And then I just met someone who says he's my cousin. I don't believe him, but Mr. Edwards. Right, so the Caribbean is a very, very small place. My father's from Anguilla, my mother's from Barbados, I have a brother from Montserrat. We are CARICOM citizens, so we've always believed in CARICOM integration. Getting into the presentation, so what, as the AG said, we've been doing work with the government over the last, a little bit over a year and a half. We started conversations about a year and a half, but we primarily did most of the work this year around assisting the government create a framework and structure for for its digital strategy. So getting into it, I'll start off by just putting a context. I think it's important to see where does digital government fit in to the broader picture of a digital economy. Can everyone see the screen clearly? All right, you can see this part. So this is I basically pulled an excerpt from the World Economic Forum. They have an article called, a report called A Shared Digital Future. And it was about building an inclusive, trustworthy, and sustainable digital society. So just in terms of society, society is what we live in. It's where we work, live, and play, right? And it mentioned 3 areas from the point of view of people living in the digital world. Looking at digital future being inclusive, so everyone should be part of the future of digital. Trust the foundation. People will share information and share data if they believe that they can trust you with it, right? And we've seen that with the whole thing around Facebook, et cetera, where people feel their trust has been betrayed. But people share. It's a sharing economy, because by sharing it helps you improve. But you have to apply these concepts to how we live in the Caribbean. I mean, historically, we've been, and I don't know about St. Kitts, but in many Caribbean countries, people are very hesitant to work with the next person or to share or participate. And you find in larger countries, by sharing and networking, businesses do better, and governments are the same. So trust is a key element. And that was one of the things that came up when we did our interviews with the cabinet and with civil society and the private sector as the whole aspect of trust. And the last point I was raised is sustainability. Building systems or looking at strategies for the future, they need to be sustainable. We don't want flash in the pan, .com flip. We want something that's going to build a society for the long term. And so society is what we live in. When you kind of like look at, and I'll speak to it, I give an example of what is considered the most digital society in the world, Estonia. How many persons here have seen or heard the story of Estonia? Okay, so I'll just briefly talk about Estonia, and it's a good example and a good thing to go by. Estonia was part of the USSR, and when the USSR fell, broke apart, I think it was 1992, they were on their own, a small country of 1.2 million people. I can't remember how many thousands of square miles, but they had to say, how do we fend our way forward? We had nothing. It's not like they have agriculture or tourism and stuff. And they built the economy saying we're going to create a digital society and we're going to leverage digital to help us go forward. So it speaks about what they started in 1992, and they're now the most digital country in the world. They rank #1 in the world continuously. But they came from a small country of 1.2 million people to be the #1 country in the world in terms of e-services. So I'll share with you a view of Estonia. Audio.
3 million people, and to one of the most advanced digital societies in the world. From e-residency to online voting to national ID cards, we're here to see how Estonia can be a blueprint for other countries looking to go digital. For our first stop, we went straight to the top with a visit to Estonia's president, Kersti Kaljulaid. If you could describe Estonia's digital society to someone who's maybe never heard of it before, what would you say?
You can apply for passport, you can apply for driver's license, you can sell your car and buy a car online, register it online. So most of the services in Estonia, when it concerns public service, is digital. We have a generation who has grown up knowing that you communicate digitally.
Estonians realized because they embraced the internet and technology, business and everything is going to move to the internet. Instead of just having an offline ID card, you also need something that works online.
So we are inside the showroom of e-Estonia, which showcases a lot of the country's digital solutions. We're going to take a look at the electronic ID and digital signatures. Every Estonian is issued a digital ID. Physical ID cards are paired with digital signatures that citizens use to pay taxes, vote, do online banking, and access their healthcare records. For a small country, the impact of the digital signatures has been big, saving the government an estimated 2% of GDP per year in salaries and expenses. Estonia says 99% of its public services are available online 24/7. It takes under 5 minutes to fill out taxes online, around 1/3 of citizens vote online, and 99% of prescriptions are issued electronically. Health records can be shared among doctors using a single electronic file that the owner can see at any point in time too.
So here you can see a list of doctors that I have been in treatment with. Everything that regards your health record, your health, this is here.
So another big feature of Estonia's digital society is the e-residency program. This basically allows you to start a company here in Estonia even if you're not a resident. E-residents can benefit from the European Union's single market without actually living in the EU. Estonia was the first country in the world to offer e-residency, and so far more than 50,000 people have applied for the program since it launched in 2014. So we are on our way to meet with Taavi Kotka. Taavi is a well-known presence in Estonia as the country's first Chief Information Officer.
We just started to think about it, like how we can increase the amount of people who are connected to Estonia. We had to approach this question differently, and we took the approach that, okay, why not we connect them digitally?
So how did Estonia become so high-tech? It all started in 1991 when the country gained independence from the Soviet Union. The government embarked on a series of fast-track reforms to modernize the economy, and it saw investments in technology as a key way to boost economic growth. By 2000, all schools were equipped with computers, and today children as young as 7 years old learn how to code. The government also offered free computer training to 10% of the adult population. These efforts helped raise the percentage of Estonians who use the internet from 29% in the year 2000 to an impressive 91% in 2016. Skype was one of Estonia's early tech success stories. The video chatting company, which was bought by Microsoft, was founded here in 2003. Estonia claims it's home to more tech unicorns, which are private companies valued at more than $1 billion per capita than any other small country in the world. Its recent unicorns include payments company TransferWise and Uber competitor Taxify. Other companies focusing on everything from blockchain to organic food are now vying to be the next Estonian unicorn.
I think the environment that is set up right now is very friendly, and I hope they keep it this way.
So the road to a digital society here in Estonia hasn't been without bumps along the way. In 2007, the country suffered a massive cyber attack, which forced the government to take steps toward protecting online security. Estonia helped launch a branch of NATO devoted to fighting similar attacks. The government created a data embassy in Luxembourg where it stores copies of all of its data. And schools teach cyber hygiene starting in elementary school. The efforts haven't stopped cyber attacks altogether, but today many people here are convinced their data is safer online than on pen and paper.
You actually see who has access to data, what data was collected, why, how it was used. And if you have an ability to control that, you can cover it, you can delete it, etc. It actually gives you more privacy.
One thing we learned about Estonia's digital society, it's not enough just to keep up with technology. As its population ages, Estonia is trying to lure in high-skilled workers like digital nomads, remote workers who use technology to do their jobs anywhere around the world. We're heading in to meet Carolee Hendriks. She's the CEO of a company called Jobatical. She's working with Kiluvansi from the Estonian Interior Ministry to develop what would be the world's first digital nomad visa. It's one example of a public-private partnership at work.
It really reflects on what our whole immigration policy is about. We want to attract talented people, entrepreneurs that are beneficial to our society, to our economy.
Do you see it as important to be attracting skilled workers?
The loudspeaker of the world, which means United States right now or Brexit, it kind of seems that loud is closing down, but there's a lot of countries who are actually thinking about how to make it easier, how to attract people. Where people will move will very much define the failure or success of economy, right?
So we're seeing how initiatives like the digital nomad visa and e-residency are encouraging startups and entrepreneurs here in Estonia. This is the Tenopol complex. It's home to more than 200 tech companies. Priit Gruus founded a health tech company whose app helps detect early stages of skin cancer.
The small environment, the digital environment, people are very open for new innovations. As a market size, it's not that big, so you really have to think big at the very first step and think of your growth plans into other countries and other continents even.
Replicating Estonia's digital success in bigger, more diverse countries will be easier said than done. After all, the entire population here is roughly equivalent to that of Dallas. But in a world that's only getting more digital, there are a lot of lessons we can learn from this glimpse into the future.
So I did that video for a reason. I did it to kind of show you the possibilities. You see how people live in Estonia, you see what Estonia is transformed to be, right? I would remit that St. Kitts has the opportunity to be that in 5-10 years' time. What I know of St. Kitts from coming here, I've seen the robotics team. I've seen digital disruptors doing stuff like CarryPay and JAD and so forth. But I also am aware of the fact when they talked about e-resident and companies wanting to come here, that there are a number of people who've used the Citizenship by Investment Program who are actually billionaires and millionaires, and many of them in the blockchain industry in St. Kitts right now. So you actually, things are happening, but the average Kittitian doesn't know that. So what you saw there is actually happening here because of the environment of St. Kitts, without the average Kittitian necessarily knowing that, right? And I shared that in terms of if you actually proactively leverage the environment and continue to create it, you attract that sort of person to your place. You also spur companies, the startups you're having, to want to go to the next level. So that starts to create a digital economy where digital drives a lot of the economy and catalyzes growth, et cetera. So what is a digital economy? I didn't use, like my friend Mr. Lawrence's Deloitte version of a digital economy, because you may say I'm biased. So I use Wikipedia, which everyone knows. Wikipedia speaks basically a digital economy, refers to economy where basically digital technologies are underpinned and help drive the transactions and trade and business in the economy. But when you look at what it comprises of, you're dealing with digital citizens, people who are digital by default, and everyone in here has a smartphone. Everyone here lives their life with this. Am I correct? There's no one here who has a normal phone. They don't exist anymore. But you don't use this for making voice calls. You use this for figuring out news, what's happening, and so forth. You are a smart citizen. Then there's also the thing of smart private sector, where the private sector organizations are digitalized and are using digital and delivering services, whether it's, someone could call and have someone delivered to them, or I can go on the website and see what's going on. But the last element of it, so you have smart citizens, you have smart business, but you need to have digital government, where all digital government services are digital by default. So this is where it's very important to have digital government, because it helps drive the digital economy. I'll just briefly touch on this. Enablers, you can't necessarily see it properly, but some of the core enablers are things like infrastructure, which you have really powerful, good bandwidth here. Think policy and regulation, digital services, can't see clearly from here, skills and public digital records, etc. But there's certain core things where government helps facilitate, and then private sector and companies like the Cable Flow and Digicel help provide infrastructure to drive it. So what do we mean by digital transformation in government? And as the AG rightfully said, he actually did most of my presentation. When you think of digital transformation, it is really, and I heard Mr. Antoine speak about it as well, and I think the Prime Minister touched on it as well. Really think about it not so much as the digital, but really think about it as a new way of operating or a new way of doing business, right? Using digital technologies to get you there. So it helps governments improve the way they operate and serve their customers who are citizens, who are businesses, etc., right? And but basically using digital technology, policy, process, and design to transform. So it's a new way of running government underpinned by digital process, digital technology, etc., right? I'll skip to that. So what we did when we came to do the work with government in terms of looking at a strategy going forward, we started with where is government now? What is in place in terms of how government operates? You can't necessarily see this clearly, you may or may not be able to, but what we did is we did a series of interviews and meetings with various ministries. We couldn't do all of the 20-something ministries and departments and agencies. We kind of picked core ones that would be representative of the whole of government. And we did interviews in terms of asking, what are your challenges now? What are the opportunities? How can things be done better, et cetera? And we consolidated the information from the various ministries, departments, and agencies. And coming out of that, we saw common themes. And we can work on those themes, defining those themes, you can then work in a way to go forward. So some of the key areas that we're focused on, I need to put on my glasses at my age. Some of the key highlights were that there's a high prevalence of technology rolled out across government, right? Government has a lot of automation in various ministries, et cetera. And some of the key ministries, when I say key, you'll find the bigger ones that are customer facing in governments around the world will be healthcare, education, and justice. And those ministries have a high level of automation, which is very good, right? You also have a dedicated, what you call digital department of technology, that focuses on technology and digital. And there's also an ICT center. So you have the framework for ICT and digital in government. And The last one is, was it? Sorry? Thank you. Thank you. The last one is the infrastructure. There is good broadband in St. Kitts, right? So you have a number of elements that facilitate government being digital, but some of the things that are missing was that there was no overarching strategy. Different ministries and departments were doing their own things and rolling out their own plans. So there wasn't a whole of government strategy, like I say, that you can fit the jigsaw pieces together and come up with the final finished jigsaw. Everyone was doing their own thing, but then it became like silos. So the public doesn't necessarily see one government when I'm paying services. They don't see one government when I'm doing doing business. If I want to do a private development and it has to hit 4 ministries, I have to go to individual ministries. So not necessarily having an overall strategic alignment. Some of the other issues were information sharing. So there are a lot of agencies doing their own thing, but it's not necessarily a strong collaboration and sharing of information internally. Some of the other issues are, I'm going to come off the stage. I see better when I'm not on the stage. Thank you very much. It follows me. Some of the other challenges are talent management, being able to have a whole strategy around people management in government, right? Process optimization. The way people experience government is the processes that are in existence. And this is not unique to government of St. Kitts. This is all governments. The processes are inherited. The processes are the way government does business, right? So when people say government is slow in responding or business finding it slow, it isn't government is slow, it's the processes are maybe 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 steps when maybe you optimize them and they could be faster. And the last aspect is governance, having proper governance, efficient governance structures and teams in place. So that's what we saw when it came to what we found as the current state. In terms of, we also did a citizen survey that was issued to the public, and we had, I can't remember what the actual response was. I think it was 300, 400, 500 people. But some of the key things that came back from the survey from citizens were majority of people have access to the internet on personal devices. So whether it's a phone, iPad, or a tablet, they have access to the internet. And I'll show that in the next slide. People are generally satisfied or neutral to the level of service received from government, right? Large portions of people, a significant amount of the population are unaware of services being offered online by government or digitally by government and have never accessed digital government services, even though they use their smartphone and internet devices in an everyday thing. And of those using it, majority are not completely satisfied with the platform. And I think that's just based on some of the platforms being designed from a technology point of view, but they have to be designed from what do the users want, how do they want to engage, right? And those things can be easily rectified. So those are some of the core points. The next slide kind of shows, this is just to give an outsider's view. So this is what Hootsuite, which is an international company, this is, they push out something which gives statistics of internet usage on countries around the world every year. So this is the latest one. This is what they say of St. Kitts. So they say St. Kitts has a total population of 56,100. I don't know if that's true or not. And of that, they say urbanization is 31%. But of that, and what I want to get to, which is important, look at the number of mobile subscriptions you have and look at the penetration. There's 76.7 thousand mobile subscriptions, 137%. So basically, you realize that you all use a lot of mobile. And the providers should be happy to hear that. And the providers already know that probably. Internet usage is 78%, social media usage is 68%, and mobile social media usage is 62%. There's a reason why I'm showing you this when it comes to a digital government strategy. Why am I showing you that? If you're creating a strategy that's going to be digital, you have to recognize there are a lot of mobile users in St. Kitts, and the strategy needs to include that. Does that make sense? You can't just have it for laptops and PCs. You have to cater for the mobile users, because that is how digital, they don't, my daughter who's 15 does not go on a laptop to access the internet. We're familiar with this. And in St. Kitts, they don't do it either. So those are current state things which are relevant in terms of where things stand. In terms of the future state, so we then came back and did a whole thing around workshops around where do we see St. Kitts government in the future. And one of the things we did is we did what we call a global digital government scan, where we provided insights into what some of the top countries in the world, top digital countries in the world are doing, and uniqueness that they have. So we would have talked about, we would have given insights into the UK, Taiwan, because you have a relationship with Taiwan, Singapore, Estonia, Canada, and Denmark. And by sharing insights, what it allows the participants to do is to, rather than make up everything for themselves, have an idea of what best practices are and see where there are things that we can leverage in terms of when we're defining our strategy. Does that make sense? You know that Steve Jobs never created anything on his own. All of Steve Jobs' ideas came from someone else. And Apple is now one of the largest companies in the world. So there's nothing wrong with learning from the best. And that was the concept. This is the process we use, where we use a Deloitte tool called the Strategic Cascade, but we focused on visioning and a strategy, and then we focused on a new operating model for government, because that's what it's about, a new way of doing business, right? So coming out of that, putting together the current state, and then the future definition from the workshops, we then started to compile a strategy, and these are the key elements of the strategy. And this was done not just, when we did the workshop, we also had a meeting with the cabinet, so we got a perspective on cabinet in terms of the vision, policies, and some of the key areas that they want to focus on. So the vision of that we were to put together in the document speaks to the digital strategy vision is the St. Kitts and Nevis government will partner with its stakeholders to make St. Kitts and Nevis a world leader in digital services delivery for citizens, residents, the private sector, and investors in a manner that is safe, efficient, interactive, and responsive to the needs of end users. So it is citizen and business driven, right? And which catalyzes economic growth and contributes to national development. So it kind of covers a lot of key areas. Like the Prime Minister said earlier, it is because of the citizens, the business and public, government then is building a strategy of its digital government driven by the needs of the end users. But it also has to catalyze growth of the economy and contribute to its development of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. So that's the vision. The values, making it collaborative, creating a culture where employees, citizens, and businesses work together for their benefit. Leadership, to have a clear vision of where you're going, and for the people to feel connected, empowered, and guided by its leaders. And trust and integrity, doing what you say you do, and making sure that you deliver that to the communities that you're serving, right? And principles, user-centered design, data-driven efficiency, sustainability, innovation. I'm going faster because I've been told the chime will happen for me anytime soon. So I want to get to some of the key pillars of the strategy. So there are 5 pillars that were defined for making sure the strategy works. The first one is ensuring customer-centric experiences. So it's very much focused on the customer, which are citizens and businesses. So making sure the experience is delightful and delivers what the customer wants. Second one is about empowering public servants. So we focus on customers. There's also a second pillar, focus on civil servants to make sure they can work and deliver services to the public. The third one is creating the framework and enabling infrastructure for digital government. So that's all the technology and the processes and everything but the framework for it so it works. And then so the first 3 focus on building out digital government, customer focus, customer engagement, talent management within civil service, and then the infrastructure and processes and everything on digital government. The last 2 are making it smart. So creating a data-driven environment. Data is the new oil. Data is what drives the digital economy. So making sure government has data for policy making and decision making within government. And then the last one is innovation. In order for sustainability, you need to innovate yourself. You need to be able to create and co-create with organizations like these guys in robotics, etc. Right? So government continues to go to the next level all the time. Right? So those are the key strategic initiatives. I'm going to go through each one of them quickly. So the future, this basically is saying, for citizens, the future of government should be personal, proactive, and connected. The citizen is at the center. That's the key point. We're going to use digital, but digital should surround the citizen, delivery to the citizen, or delivery to the business. Yes? And this is making sure it's citizen-centric. So in some of the key activities to deliver on the first pillar of customer centricity is looking at online access. So we're looking at things like online payments, online access to information, and that'll be like the portal, etc. Or how do we deliver services to the citizens, and things like being able to pay for services online and access information online, right, however you want. Citizen engagement is the second one. Creating citizen engagement platforms and frameworks so you can co-create and engage citizens in determining where government needs to go. And that goes to the whole thing like policies that may come out, and before you finalize it, government engaging with the citizens to make sure they're on the right track. Having the platforms, two-way platforms to engage and interact. And that may be digital, that may be town hall meetings. The third thing is co-creation, and that goes into creating the policies together. And I've seen that things like freedom of information, et cetera, with the private sector, et cetera. And the last one is, in terms of doing all that customer-centric experiences, you need to have a way of measuring to see if what you're doing is correct and you're not going down the wrong path. So there's a kind of framework of activities. I've summarized it, but there are a whole list of actions to put this in place to create the customer centricity, the first pillar, right? And I have a video that kind of talks to Gov UK and how they've done their portal. Can you get sound, please? Sound. So that's showedgov.uk. The reason why showedgov.uk is actually supposed to be one of the top government portals in the world, right? And if you go to it, I mean, it's functional. It's very, very functionally efficient. You can do anything. So you go online. It's actually a delight for UK citizens. They use the portal as the first port of interaction with government rather than calling the government office, because anything and everything they want to do is there. The government of St. Kitts has a portal, and I think portals go through an evolution. A portal doesn't always start as a gov.uk portal. They have been through iterations of it. Oftentimes people start as a marketing portal talking about what services government offers, but then you have to kind of build it where we understand what do people want. And then there's a very complex whole thing of customer journey mapping and process design to end up. But that is where we want to go over the next 3 years for Government of St. Kitts. Yes? So I can go to the portal and do anything and never have to get in the car and go to a government office. Does that sound like a sensible way? Right, and also do online and pay for all services through the portal as well, which is where you're going, right? So then you never have to go in an office, which is why in Estonia, there's a guy I actually saw, Leonard Vic from Estonia, who's seen as the father of Estonia. He was in Barbados last week, and he said he can't remember the last time he's been to a government office. He doesn't go, he hasn't been in like 10 years, because you do everything online. So second pillar is empowering public servants, right? So when we put all this technology in, we need to make sure our public servants, you can't just put in technology and expect people to cross the river and be geniuses. We have to bring them along and get them up to speed and let them be proficient so they can use the technology delivery services. Does that make sense? That is oftentimes, and I heard the Prime Minister speak about it, that's oftentimes the last thing people talk about when they look at digital transformation in government. They roll out computers and don't bring the people along. So we're not going to do that in this transformation. So the whole thing about it is empowering the civil service, right, and having a plan around that. So there are things like digital retraining and reskilling, and I'll show you a video that talks to it. But the whole thing of letting persons who've been in the civil service so well understand technology the way my 15-year-old daughter does it. I mean, she's a native. I am older than her. I have a degree in computer engineering, but I let her do all the technology in the house because she's been born into that, right? She's been born into that. So that is where we need to get our people to be able to use technology second nature, like the way they do. So digital retraining and upskilling, the whole thing about doing skills gaps and mapping a path. Interagency collaboration is also empowering the civil service for people to create cross-functional teams. So sustainable development, working with statistics, working with tourism around a project, right? But being able to create that so the civil service is empowered to be able to work better. The third area looks at the tools to do that, digital collaboration tools. And the last PEG activity looks at the whole thing is called future of work. So the whole concept of the new workforce and using augmentation. So having a job, but if I can use things like artificial intelligence or whatever to support my job, I take away the robotic process automation. I mentioned those, but what it is basically saying, instead of doing repetitive work every day, I can push that to software and I can use work, which is where I'm using my brain. Yes? So I'm not moving something in tray to out tray. I'm using my brain and letting software do the repetitive work. Yes? Things like answering emails and so forth. And that's defining a whole future of work model for the government of St. Kitts. So we have skilled workers. And this is just a video. So the UK has something called a UK Government Digital Academy. And they build digital capacity via reskilling. So there's actually a structured government program for it. And we had suggested that model is a good model to take under our wing. Where they basically rotate people through 6 weeks. We're not saying copy it, but we're saying the concept of it. They will take people through 6 weeks of training in 4 pillars of digital: user-centered design, agile development, digital tools, and digital government services. And I'm going to run a video that actually speaks to the Government Digital Academy.
The GDS Academy has been created to build capability up across government.
I used to teach teenagers computer science. I'm really excited to be in government to teach public sector workers the same sort of thing, the new and emerging technology that's coming out now.
I believe in the Academy, I believe in Agile, I believe what we're delivering, so I'm passionate about it. I'm delighted to be a facilitator in the Academy.
Our senior leadership has been thinking about how we work differently, the organisational culture, so they sent us on this Agile training.
Agile's the way forward, user-centric design's the way forward.
We try and make it very open and friendly and safe for people to come along and make mistakes in the classroom and learn by those.
And then off you go with your group and then you deliver outcomes, you work on a project together, really putting things into practice.
As a team, we've already started to have discussions about how we can shift our ways of working to start applying some of these principles.
It's going to help you no matter what you go into because the principles apply to anything. I would recommend attending the course even if you don't work in a digital setting.
This course, the Introduction to Artificial Intelligence in Government, is very much about foundation. It's very much about the non-technical people who want to know more. We're going to teach you how to get started. We're also holding masterclasses which are run by academics. We have the Emerging Technology Development Programme, which again is for technology professionals.
It's vital that as many people throughout the civil service understand the fundamentals of new technology.
These new technologies are coming and are here in some places, and we need to stay ahead of that.
It's been a great environment to work in. I would definitely recommend it.
So that's the Government Digital Service Academy in the UK, right? And that's a concept we're suggesting you adopt here so you can have all civil servants, all public servants be able to understand digital and be able to leverage technology to deliver the level of customer experience we mentioned in the first pillar, right? So that's the second pillar. The third pillar looks at creating a framework for digital government, enabling digital government. This has like 8 elements to it. The first one, government needs to have a whole of government technology strategy. Individual ministries have their own strategies. Individual ministries have their own technology strategies, but there needs to be one which is all-encompassing in terms of how does government as a whole deliver, whether it's customer service or payments or whatever, rather than each ministry doing its own payments, each ministry doing its own whatever. It needs to be a whole government technology strategy that then there's sub-strategies that come off of that. The next area which we looked at is business process optimization. So the whole thing about mapping processes in the government now, which is a whole exercise in itself, because even the private sector, for a private sector company to map its processes, I can guarantee you most of them are not documented. People don't document processes. So the mapping, you have to map how does this work in this ministry, get it down on paper, and when you start, you realize that 4 people do it 4 different ways because they learn from the person ahead of them. So you have to do current mapping, and then you have to optimize it from a customer-centric point of view. How would it be better to deliver to the end person? And then you then optimize it and then define it. How can I use technology to help me get there? Third area is cybersecurity. If we're going to talk about digitization in the next one. But if we digitize, which is what the AG spoke about, if we digitize all of the paper and all the stuff in filing cabinets and make it data, and we put it on servers in government, then you have the risk of somebody breaking and hacking and being able to exploit. So we need to have a cybersecurity framework once we go into digital data. And then the last one, the fourth one, talks about a whole infrastructure plan. The cloud, the wide area network, the local area networks, and all those things. The next one is digital identity. We need to look at identity management, right? And the whole frame, that's a whole large area in itself. But if I move into digital, you saw Estonia people use cards. So I, Roger Ennisco, log on in Estonia, and I say I am me, and then get all my services, including my health records. If you go in there, you have to figure out how do I create digital identity in government, as well as passports and all these things. Platforms, defining platforms that are going to provide services, whether it's collaboration platforms or whatever, what platforms in government. Policy and governance, we need to look at policies from an IT point of view, ICT and process policies, and legislation is key. You can do all of that, but if you don't, your legislation is written for an analog world, right? You started to do things which change that, but digital legislation, and the AG knows about that, is a whole thing unto itself, which is Estonia, Singapore, and all of them have to pass a whole suite of new legislation, electronic signatures, accepting, most things you only accept physical documents. You have to be in an environment where I can appreciate electronic documents as valid documents. So all of that needs to be done, and that's a whole area in itself. So that's the whole aspect of.
Hi, my name is Alex Ben.
I'm going to skip this one. That's the guy there. I'm sure is Alex Benet. He's the CIO of Canada, but I don't want the chime to go off for me while he's in the middle of his video. So let me get to the last 2 areas. I think you recognize the person in the picture. Data-driven government. We're leading by the Prime Minister. So we're going to use data to drive policy making and decision making. The Prime Minister doesn't know he's going to be doing that, but that's him. So we're basically using data and evidence. We talked about evidence-based decision making. So we're going to use data that government collects the most data in the country. Everybody has to interact with government. How do we use that data to be able to make informed decisions on how to better serve our citizens? So we have to start with, to get data, we have to move it from paper to digital. So we have to do digitization. That itself is a multi-year strategy. Then the second area we talk about is having a data and information management framework. So you digitize the data, but we need to have policy, data governance and information governance on how we manage it. Analytics and insights. We then have to be able to use analytics tools to drill the data and get insights from it. And then the last aspect talks about open data, which is the whole concept of freeing up. There's certain data that is not necessarily confidential or mission critical, where we collect information, for example, how many cruise ship passengers are coming in to the cruise in the port. We can maybe push that out on the website as data that startups can use that to create new businesses around passengers coming to St. Kitts. Does that make sense? And there's non-critical data that you can leverage for things, and that's a whole aspect of open data. And the last pillar is innovation. So I said the first 3 were about building the foundation of digital government, which is customer-centric experiences. What was the second one? First one was customer-centric experience. The second one was empowering civil servants. And the third one was building the digital government. And then the last 2 deal with making government smart, as I would say. So we look at, so the last area is innovation. This one is data, and this one is innovation, right? So how do we make it sustainable that government, once it starts to build it, it can, in itself, be able to innovate new ideas all the time? So we've suggested or promoted a concept, well, we didn't necessarily create it, This is a model Canada has used, where government within itself creates an innovation environment, innovation lab, innovation hubs. So you have a central one where you have people who are taught, who know how to innovate, how to teach other departments to innovate, and they drive it. And then what happens is you have mini hubs within the various ministries. So when they're going to do something, they sit down and they brainstorm, is there a way we can do it in an innovative way? We don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. We may tweak this process or partner with someone, but we think of we think outside the box to achieve a way. And we're saying, drive that, put that into government. If you put that into government, you end up like Estonia. Because they think differently and do things differently, and don't just sit and say, we have to go and ask the financial secretary for $1 million every time. There are ways to do things by changing the way you've done it before. Does that make sense? That is what startups do every day. That's what the disruptors like Elon Musk and Steve Jobs do. They innovate. So we should do that in government. So we're suggesting create an environment in government for innovation. I think I have a video here. I'm not going to show it because I'll get shut down. The 3 steps there are: 1, establish an innovation strategy; 2, then build capacity around the innovation. Build capacity, and the last one is scale it. So you create a strategy, you start to define an innovation model, you then start to build capacity, which is building out and starting to put a pipeline of projects, and the last one is you scale it to really large. And innovation involves things like public-private partnerships. So you partner with accelerators, you partner with the college. What's the name of the college? Sorry? Right, that one. So you partner with the college, but you partner with accelerators and startups. So government doesn't have to figure out everything. Scotland has a model called the SafeTech model, which Barbados says they're adopting, where they bring an accelerator in. We create an accelerator within government, and then the accelerator brings in people from the private sector. They give them a problem government has. They give them like £5,000, and they fund you for a month and a half to come up with a solution. And therefore, government can get solutions to their problems by having funding done by smart people in kits who can figure out things. You don't have to go and spend $1 million every time. Does that make sense? So that's another concept. So that's the last one. So those are the 5 pillars that we have defined for government. In terms of the transformation approach, so in order to do it, as the AG mentioned, and I don't think you necessarily, okay, you can't see that one because you can't see either. We define a transformation. You need to have a defined set of people on this program, right? It isn't going to happen by itself. And everybody in government right now is busy. So you need to have dedicated people who are going to be focusing, like, you want to call it orchestra leaders, right? You know how orchestra works. The way an orchestra works is you have brass and you have drums and you have horns and so forth. But you need somebody in front there with a stick doing this, directing the orchestra, yes? Otherwise, everybody does their own thing. So we need to have someone managing the way because there are different work streams and many things going on at the same time, and things cross over to other things. So we're saying let's have a transformation manager office, and this is the structure of it, where you create a unit that's going to have a head of the transformation. It will have what I call program managers, but they're really project managers, and they're going to be managed. You see, we have 5 work streams, 5 initiatives. They're going to be managing the initiatives and the activities under them. They're also change managers on the bottom. This is the proposed thing. So you have program/project managers managing those projects and the sub-projects, and then you also have change managers, because when you're doing things differently, you need to have change management. Anyone knows change management? The challenge why many things don't work is because you do things differently and expect people to come along, but you don't have the change management process of keeping people informed, advising them how things change, what's in it for you, how are you going to be different, I'm not going to lose my job. There's a whole change management process. So when you do that and you don't do change management, you leave people behind and then the thing fails. So we're not going to do that, correct? We're doing change management. So we have program managers, change managers, and then you have digital people. On the right-hand side, we have people who understand digital technology, whoever define them, probably from the Department of Technology, who are going to work along. And that's what we see as the Transformation Management Office structure. The theory of it is the Transformation Office reports to a steering committee, which should be key people, key leaders in government, whether they're permanent secretaries in key ministries. And the key ministries are not necessarily the biggest ones. They're the ones that deal with whole of government and deal with transformation and change. So they lead up to that, and the steering committee, in theory, then reports directly into cabinet. Yes, so we have a proper governance structure for making sure this transformation happens. And we're not, and the TMO people are not going directly to the Prime Minister every day and say what is happening. But they're going to a steering committee, and the steering committee reports to cabinet. So therefore, you realize the work streams are happening, the money's being well spent, and then it's measurable. We're also looking at measurement, right? And so measurement of performance indicators, we shouldn't do something and not be able to measure is there impact. Do we agree? Right. So we need to see improvement. And what we're saying, some of the indicators will be things like, which everyone mentioned repeatedly, doing business. Time is up. I have 10 seconds. So doing business is one. That will impact the business community, right? Things like other ICT things, ICT Development Index, etc. This is the journey, which you can't see, but we basically taken all of the sub-projects. The colors are the work streams, and then the individual things, the individual projects under them. But we said do it over a period of time. Start with the strategy and the planning. Wave one. Wave one is planning and strategy. So anything that's around planning and defining what you're going to do, and maybe some low-hanging fruit. Wave two is you start to put foundation in place, like build our infrastructure, etc. Wave three then goes into developing it at a further stage. Wave four. And this we're suggesting at an aggressive stage can be done over a 3-year period, but to have a plan and to know what you're starting with and what you're finishing. These are some of the benefits. That's it.
Thank you very much. We are going to move into a short discussion period. Anyone who wishes to make a contribution from the floor or to ask a question, this is the opportunity to do that. As we prepare ourselves for that, I just want to say, listening to the presentation just now, that we all should feel proud of some of the presenters we had on the outside with the kiosks, and the young folks that are leading the charge with the new innovations that we have seen in the hallway. I think they deserve some love. Because it all connects with the presentation we had just now and the overall theme of today's consultation, that the way forward for a small developing nation like ours has to be technologically driven. We have tried many things in our historical path. We tried one time cotton, we tried sugar, we tried tobacco, we tried tourism, still trying, we tried agriculture and its diversification, we tried a citizenship by investment program, we tried offshore business, and every time we try those, there are challenges that confront. So in moving ahead to give us a leverage in terms of technology, it is good not only for today's presentation being what it is from the government's perspective in association with the partners in the private sector, but to see that our young people are already positioning themselves to take advantage. Give them another round of applause. All right, do we have any? There's a mic that is available, so if we have anyone who wishes to make a short contribution, now is the opportunity. Who is the first taker? Question, comment from anyone?
I have a question. Can you hear me? So this is the first time in my lifetime, at least, where we actually can see the possibility of true democracy. Democracy in the sense that the digital highway allows us all to plug into it and allows us all to play a part, and play a part on an equal, level playing field. You talked about Estonia. I was fortunate enough to visit Estonia. I've been fortunate enough to visit other small islands. I believe strongly that St. Kitts and Nevis, in 5 to 10 years' time, can exceed Estonia by virtue of one simple fact. We have 55,000 people, if the stats are correct. But we have 55 homogenous people. What we don't have, and what we need to build towards, is the The Internet of Things means that everybody needs to participate in it. You cannot stand back, and you cannot let others participate ahead of you. What we have here is what many would describe as paradise on earth. The biggest disruption that we're seeing in our lives, or at least in my lifetime, is the way we work. It's the way we think. It's the way we do things. You can live in St. Kitts and Nevis, and you can participate with the whole world. You are no longer restricted by your borders. The only thing that restricts you, and this is particularly for the young people, is your ability to participate in this digital highway. So we have a choice. It could either be the digital highway, where you have democracy for everybody, or you can have digital slavery, where we're one step behind what is really happening. I think one of the speakers spoke about it's a comparative relationship, whereby somebody takes 4 steps, if you're only taking 2 steps, you're behind. So this is the opportunity we have. We must also understand that in terms of generations, we have millennials who are now choosing to live, work, think the way they want to. So they can live in St. Kitts and work in New York, or they can live in Antigua and work in Moscow. The world is there for everybody to participate in. What we, or what the government needs to focus on, and I'm sure the government will focus on, is on creating that enabling environment that allows everybody to participate. 55,000 people. I predict that in 10 years' time, done properly, Estonia will be behind St. Kitts and Nevis. You spoke about data being the new oil. If I take the analogy of Kuwait, I predict in 5 to 10 years' time, done the right way, St. Kitts and Nevis will be ahead of Kuwait. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hennis, for a very good presentation. I'm excited to see what will come out of the digital strategy that's been developed for the government and the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. And I'm also very encouraged to see where we're at now in terms of technical infrastructure, the capabilities, etc., the young people coming on stream. But I still think that we're not realizing or close enough to realizing our true potential. So I'm hoping out of the digital strategy we will get much closer to that. I'll provide a bit of context. A generation ago, PayPal was born, 1998. PayPal, a digital wallet, I think most people know about it, payment system was born. But interestingly enough, around the same time, another company was working and developing advanced stages on the digital wallet, payment system, online gaming, etc. Even more interesting, that company was based in St. Kitts. And very, very, very interesting is that the majority of staff of that company were Kittitians. So, in light of the gentleman's pronouncement there, I would say definitely in less than 10 years, we can achieve tremendous things if, as he mentioned, if done properly. Which brings me to a couple points. I think some of the things that the government should consider, one being effective procurement and oversight practices. That is, I think we can recall back in 2004, President Obama launched the healthcare website, $90 million, and it didn't work. By a year and a half later, it ballooned to $1.7 billion for a website. Crazy. All because of ineffective procurement and oversight practices. It just ran away. So with a digital strategy on the table, with opportunities becoming available, it's incumbent upon the government to ensure that they get as many players as possible to the table, because you never know who you'll come across. It may be a young person who's just come with some innovation they've been working on for the past year or two, no one's knowledge. But you have to put it out there. You have to give as many people as possible the opportunity. Research and development. I think in the Caribbean, not just in St. Kitts, we fall short when it comes to research and development. And research and development has to be a key component in terms of what it is the government looks at establishing a process or ministry or department or agency that cuts across all ministries and agencies in government that has a clear focus on research and development. Because a key part of innovation comes from research and development. I'm very pleased to see that open data was mentioned because that was one of the key points I wanted to raise as well. One of the key points for digital economy and digital innovation is access to data. You can, if there's a repository of data online or somewhere else where entrepreneurs in the ICT world can access, they can then innovate and create applications to present to government or businesses or etc. based on the data they have available. And finally, because I want to make it short, in terms of financing some of the plans to take us forward, especially as it relates to entrepreneurs and innovators, I'm recommending that the government looks at, I know there's a sustainable development fund, look at either having a component of that or establishing a totally different fund that deals with specifically investment in digital or innovative related projects. So whether it is a startup, because let's be real, you have a startup with a crazy idea, it's unlikely going to get funding from banks or the typical financing agents. So you need, for a digital economy to be vibrant, I like to use the term, you need focus and you need chaos. The government needs to, and which is what they seem to be doing, have a clear path. This is where we want to be in 5, 10 years. We want to be dominant on these levels. And then you need chaos in the sense of contain chaos. Entrepreneurs fueled with the resources, they can just bang up, collaborate, come up with ideas, do things, and have that drive in the next year. But again, I'm encouraged to see where we're going, and hopefully it's all implemented properly, because that would really put us a long way ahead of everyone else, in my opinion. Thank you.
Great points. Thank you. Go right ahead.
Hi, my name's Adam Anderson, and I just have been thrilled to hear the content that's been shared and by both the panelists and the audience. I also want to commend the government for making real strides in advancing ICTs over the years, including the new ICT Center. I just wanted to share my personal experience here in St. Kitts, and it's a little maybe different, but one of the things that has to happen to innovate, and innovation is the currency of the new digital economy, is to have a space and a place that is comfortable and conducive to work. And my perspective is that the country as a whole is an incubator. By virtue of some of the things that were shared, it's small enough and accepting enough to make a real difference. And I think sometimes about, I'm always inspired by two people in a garage that come up with an idea that eventually generates annual worth more than some countries. And so it's the idea is where can we grow, where can we develop skills, where can we develop experiences, and I believe St. Kitts is the ideal place for that. And so I just wanted to share that. There are spaces and places and people in the Federation that I've met that are, including a lot of the exhibitions out here, that show us that we can. E-payments. Yes, we can. I was in Kenya last month, and I visited an incubator called iHub. And for those of you who follow these things, Kenya leads the world in paperless money. And it allows people to transact and to grow and to become entrepreneurs. St. Kitts should be this leader in the Caribbean. St. Kitts should step forward and own that brand position. And it starts, I guess, just by public-private partnerships and spaces and places for people to do their thing. But I just wanted to, you know, I can't clap with the microphone, but lend my enthusiastic support for it.
Clap for you! Thank you very much. Do we have any more? If we could turn on the mic at the head table here, please. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much for those statements, and I want to thank both Michael Prest, who spoke first, and Mr. Brown. And I thought that Michael would have liked to have spoken after Michael when he started to talk by finance. Michael would have liked to have posited his proposal to make financing available to startups like Mr. Brown. So, Mr. Brown, you have to talk to Michael Press. He can help you. Michael Press now is involved with the Bank of Nevis International, if you wanted to know that. I also wanted to commend Adam Anderson, who is one of the principals with Open Interactive. And Open Interactive has had a public-private partnership at different stages with us in the government, in the ICTs, and has been one of the drivers. Adam and Stachio Williams have been one of the drivers with the government portal and a number of other of our initiatives, and in particular this year in the work done with the Citizenship by Investment Unit, and pulling off a very remarkable issue. I wanted to come back to say something that I could not say before, and that had to do with the need for a regulatory framework. And I think that has been said by Roger, but it's important to understand that we need a whole suite of legislation to be able to have this transformation take place. Just a couple of weeks ago, we were in Parliament with the court fees bill, where we had to pass legislation to allow the use of a credit card, a debit card, to file matters in court online. It sounds simple, but it does transformation in that sense. And there are other pieces of legislation that must, consequential legislation, that must be put in place. I want to, however, mention upfront that over the next couple months, we'll be going to Parliament with a new electronic communications bill that will replace the Telecommunications Act of 2000. That Telecommunications Act of 2000 is what led to the liberalization of the telecoms industry in St. Kitts and Nevis. It was part of the ECTEL family that we were able to have the cable and wirelesses and the Digicels and all other providers be able to have a space to operate. But that bill, that act, is now passé, is out of date, and the new electronic communications bill that we go to Parliament with is going to be able to now establish a new regulatory platform for us to move forward. For instance, one of the issues that many of us traveling up and down the region have are questions of roaming, whereby when we roam, the roaming charges are so high that we lock off our phones, and that type of thing, we lock off our data. Roaming charges will now, when you use your phone, when you travel, will be the same as you're making a local call at home. So that will be one of the things that will happen. You have questions of quality of service. When some of our providers say that you can have up to 6 meg in terms of internet, and you get half of 1 meg and so on. We now have questions of how do we deal with that. Regulators can't withdraw your license because you're not doing that, but we now will have a regulatory framework for NTRCs and our regulators to better manage how we can provide this digital economy. And I want to add one other issue that has been very troubling for our service providers, and that is the concept of what you call net neutrality, where you have other third-party providers using the various channels of a service provider, and the service provider has difficulty in blocking and throttling that type of stuff. Why should WhatsApp be able to use Cable and Wireless's network and not pay something? And those are some of the questions that we have had to grapple with over the last few years to get to this stage. But the new regulatory framework is critical to be able for us to provide this new digital framework, the space in which we have to transform our economy. That and others, I could go on and speak of questions of GDPR. GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulations that the European Union has in relation to privacy of people's information, where you have to get permission to use people's private information and so on. The questions of privacy become very important in this environment. And we can go on and on and on. But I'll allow, if somebody else wants to make a comment, I would want them to do so.
Good day, everyone. My name is Oksana Isaac, and I'm a member of the St. Kitts and Nevis robotics team. And on behalf of the CFBC IT program, I must say that we feel pleased to be in an environment where technology is so passionately discussed and included in the evolution of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Thank you very much. Do we have any more? We have time for...
Of course.
Oh.
Good day, everyone. My name is Abian Stevens. I have been recently instated as the captain of the robotics team that will be going to Dubai on the 21st of October, where the competition will be held for about a week. While I'm standing here, I would like to ask for your support as we will be representing the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, and please pray for our wins. We're going to win. That's it, you can continue.
Thank you very much. We have one to the back here. I think we have two mics going around, so one to the back here. We also have one here. We're coming to you just now, sir. Go right ahead, ma'am.
Good day all. My name is Carol Boddy, and I'm the president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of the Eastern Caribbean, St. Kitts Nevis Limited, or St. Kitts Nevis branch. I want to say to the team from the CFBC, congratulations. We're really proud of the work that you have been doing. And my comment is in that vein, because it is really sad that at this stage where we're discussing the digital economy, computer and IT is not an essential subject in our high schools. In most of our high schools, persons move from first form to second form, and they have not had any formal introduction to computer. In fact, some schools will say only the 1A5s and the 1A6 get exposed to computer. It is extremely sad. The Prime Minister, in his remark, spoke about the 25,000 or more persons who are currently employed in the economy. He talked about residents and citizens. If we are not preparing our students, it means that there will be more residents than citizens being employed, because our students, those who are coming out of school, will not be prepared. Question: of the over 300 students that are away studying, how many of them have a focus on IT and innovation? These are some of the questions we need to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boddy. I will say this, that at the new National ICT Center, we do have an innovation hub with a dedicated coordinator that puts on regularly a number of programs, visits schools. There have been 2 workshops over the summer dealing with young people. And I would say further that the Ministry of Education, and I see the minister getting ready to follow me up, has just been doing a revamp of the entire curriculum. The entire curriculum that is now going to be based principally on the ICTs, and I think that it's unfortunate. I'll let the minister himself say it himself. But just to make the point that this has been a focus, is one that we in technology has been running behind the Ministry of Education for the last couple of years to start the training and teaching of code at primary school level. So it's not been overlooked at all. It's very much on the front burner, and I'll let the Minister just add to that as you sat down and would hear. Thank you.
Good afternoon to everyone. The fact is, as pointed out by the AG, that the Ministry of Education is currently looking and actually in the process of rewriting the curriculum for the education sector within the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. As a part of that process, IT is being looked at, and the intention is also to have it infused in every single subject area within the primary and the secondary schools.
Yes!
Additionally, it would not have made sense to begin to teach IT in the schools without having the proper curriculum to follow. Mr. Deepak, who was stationed at Bastia High prior to going off to the graduate studies, when he returned, he was at Charles E. Mills Secondary for 1 year, but while being at Charles E. Mills Secondary, he was also stationed at the Curriculum Development Unit, where he is full-time, with a view in terms of developing the curriculum for IT within the schools in St. Kitts and Nevis. So prior to, absolutely no one was at curriculum development looking at the curriculum for IT. The Ministry of Education took a decision to have someone dedicated to doing so. So that in terms of going forward, that is the plan, to have IT as part of the curriculum for every single student.
Just a segue on that. One of the exciting programs that was observed earlier this year, which was a collaboration with the insurance company of the West Indies, ICWI, and the Chamber of Industry and Commerce and the Ministry of Education, was a coding program in the primary schools. Tucker Clark was one of the schools that was used to see the young primary school children getting involved at that level of coding in terms of her technology is another aspect in terms of the way forward that I would want us to encourage. My friend, we are now ready for you. I'm not too sure you even need a mic. But
I am. I will observe the standing protocol. I see this afternoon was thoroughly engaging, informative, comprehensive, exhaustive, and I realized with considerable delight that the youth among us are stirred. It's your world, and we are preparing it for you. I just want to start by, and I'm going to be brief, I just want to start by reiterating and reinforcing a very important point that you made, sir, when you spoke about the origin of an idea in a humble garage, which goes on to actually net revenues in the billions per annum. Nothing in the world is as powerful as an idea whose time has come, folks. And I would like to tell you this afternoon that Team Unity was an idea. And it was an idea that each one of us nurtured and brought to fruition. And because ingratitude curdles the milk of human kindness, I would like to stand on behalf of a grateful nation and say with profound sincerity the gratitude we feel for saving us from certain disaster. I said I wasn't going to be long. They said that progress is the complication of simplicity. With new technologies, new problems would arise. I have oftentimes asked myself, while contemplating and pondering the ubiquitousness of the digital world, which is worst, ability without opportunity? You've got all the intellectual acumen and you've got all of the intellectual capacity, but you don't have any opportunity. That's a certain type of pain. And then conversely, you have opportunity without ability. All the computers in the world lacking the expertise. Bob Marley comes to mind. Bob Marley said, in the abundance of water, the fool is thirsty. And then I told myself that somewhere there must necessarily be a happy medium between both folks called to mind team unity, preparing not only the infrastructure, but also creating the necessary expertise that is so vital to nation building. And as a consequence, from what I've seen this afternoon, it encourages me to keep faith in the ingenuity of man as reflected by team unity. And I can certainly say in closing that the sum total of our ingenuity, coupled with the leading of God, is going to lead us higher and ever higher in the bright future that team unity, in its ingenuity and creativity, has created for our beloved Federation. Team Unity, we love you.
Thank you very much.
God, we voted for you.
Thank you
Good
very much.
afternoon, folks.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to announce that lunch will be served in the Sabre Room, which is just outside there. And there is no way we can continue because there is nothing to better that inspirational presentation just now. So we take that as devotion into lunch. Please resume. Please resume. It is now 25 minutes past 1. Please resume at 20 minutes past. At 2:15. All right?
Once upon a time, business as usual was often good enough. No more. Where we are going, good enough is dead.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's time for us to resume. If we could all have our seats. All right, good afternoon. Hope everyone had a wonderful